Welcome to Wicked Felina. I'm Felina. Sorry I've been away for a while. I've been out of town. A friend had a need, and I took care of it. Anyway, wondering why I'm dressed the way I am. Well, I'm actually dressed the way I am for a reason. In fact, I'm dressed this way for the final act of my possibly 3-part series on George Orwell, 1984. Possibly throw in Animal Farm on the way. Why? It's the most important work of the century, of this century, even though it was written in last century. He predicted what was going to happen. He predicted these riots of ANTIFA, all these lovers of communism, and people who want to be enslaved. And I'm going to tell you, now, some of my videos are long. There's a lot of information in them, and I'm sorry about that. But what you have to do is you have to watch to the end, because each bit of information I'm throwing at you, even though it doesn't make any sense at all why I'm throwing it at you, and I'm sorry I'm not in a bikini, Death Rape 2001, making a sandwich, but not for this video. It coalesces at the end. It makes sense. It gets all pulled together. There's so many details and so much news and so much information that's making up of what's happening today, why they're taking down Trump, why they want to destroy America, the country that everyone in the world wants to move to, the country that became prosperous, instead of saying, hey, all these countries that are poor, why don't we just adopt capitalism instead of socialism, and we'll be rich just like America, instead of envying America and wanting to be like America? They would rather have their people suffer in abject poverty, while the people on the top and the idiots in this country that belong to ANTIFA and all these socialists, I am so sick of them. They want a world, the ones who want to rule you, even though they seem all well and good and innocuous like a balloon on a stick. They want to rule you. You see, if you become a ruler, you get all the goodies on top, and you get to make all the laws like a dictator. You see, in socialism, it's a dictator. It's one party rule. Then you've got the dictator on top, and he or she changes the rules on a whim. You don't know anything about Mao. You don't know anything about Stalin. You don't know anything about any of the Khmer Rouge. You don't know anything about what happened in these countries that adopted communism, because they all of a sudden hated capitalism. Capitalism. I'll tell you one thing about capitalism. Quick course on capitalism. Okay. China is adopting capitalism. Sticks, Hex, and Hammer is completely wrong. He is completely wrong. He said that China is not communist. It is communist. You go into the hall where they make all the rules, and the backdrop is a hammer and sickle, and then they call people in. They call people in to sit there, and they make the little people, think that they actually have a say in their government. They actually are deciding and making the rules, and people aren't ruling over them. So they have this little cluster of people who are very timid that they've picked very carefully to sit there and listen to a lecture by people who beat dogs until they die because the meat to them in these countries tastes better if the dog suffers. Okay, so people like that are walking up and down the stage, and they are telling them two things. They only have two choices of voting. One way is the way that the communist government, and it is officially in their constitution, they are a communist government. Officially, okay. Let's see if there's still a communist government after I stop talking. Okay, all right. So they have this official, they have the official way that the government doesn't want you to vote, and the official way that the government wants you to vote. What they do is they tell you the way that they don't want you to vote, and they tell you all the negatives and how bad it's going to be. And they go on and on explaining how bad it's going to be and how many people will suffer and how much the government will suffer, and on and on and on like that. So it's a stupid vote if you vote that way. But the way that the government wants you to vote, they will glorify, and all the rainbows and the pixies and the fairies will be singing just like the sound and the glorious sound of Hillary golfing. And he just lifts our spirits, and like Elizabeth Warren droning on and on and on about nothing. And then we realize that she doesn't even know anything as a law professor, anything about the law. I used to be a paralegal, by the way. Okay, well, anyway, I know a little bit about something. Okay, so then you talk, in fact, I saw this on PBS. This is amazing. I saw this on PBS. And they asked one of the women who were voting, and they asked her about the two things that they presented in front of them, the two votes. And she said, yes, I made up my mind. It was me voting. They told us one way that was not good, and the other way that was very, very good. So I voted the way that was very, very good, but it was me that made up this decision. Well, that is not a capitalist government, especially when you got the big hammer and sickle going on. I love it. Well, okay, Styx is wrong. One thing, he's wrong. One thing. Okay, the other 3 billion things he's right on, but that one thing he's wrong on. So, okay, I'll rack them up when I get a second one. I think I've seen second ones that he's been wrong on, but it's still mostly he's right about everything. But anyway, I shouldn't admit that on camera. But anyway, so, and of course they throw all the waste from the factories into the water, and all the food that's made is full of chemicals, and it's poisoned the water. So that's the reason why dogs die when they eat the treats that come from China. So you shouldn't eat those treats. But, it's like if they want the dogs to die, they prefer beating them because it tastes better. But if you poison them, then the Chinese people, we can't say, hey, if you want the dogs dead, we can't send them back because, you might get poisoned if you eat them. So that isn't, it just isn't smart of them to poison the dogs in America. It's absolutely ridiculous. It does them absolutely no good, but that's beside. But anyway, people, you see, they're building cities that nobody lives in, and they're putting 6 to 8 coal-fired power plants up a week, which is interesting because Obama let them off the hook on carbon emissions. They can get away with spewing out as many carbon emissions and pollutants. Of course, he didn't even say anything about pollutants. Obama didn't even care about the pollutants and poisoning the water. I mean, who cares about that? Everything is about global warming, right? Ooh, it's climate change now. I'm sorry about that. So he doesn't care because China is communist. And he wants communism basically to rule. And he wants these third world countries brought up while he taxes us to death. And we're brought into the sewer. That's great. So all these ANTIFA people, see, here's the thing, of course, and the same thing with India. Interesting, India is also adopting capitalism. And Gandhi actually helped them do that. My brother's a Brahmin, and he said that Gandhi said that whatever you're doing, while you're doing it, in between you're doing anything, make something, make, and then sell it. And they don't have all the regulations like that we do in this country. They don't have all the taxes. Obama put on 22,000 taxes. So if you're just a little person just trying to make a living with a very small business that you're doing out of your house, there are so many laws that you could possibly break and either get thrown into jail, or you have to pay the government lots of money. And the government needs your money because the border is open. And if you cross the border, you basically can live here for free. So that's what Obama wants, instead of fixing up the cities that are rioting and getting burned down and helping the African Americans, move forward in life. He wants to help other people move forward and kind of, well, anyway, I'm not going to get into that subject. That's a big one. Anyway, so in India, you can make as much stuff as possible, and then you make all your money. You make all your profit, and that's great. So they're moving up. Instead of eating 1 meal a day or no meals a day, they can eat 2 or 3 meals a day. It's amazing how that change came about, and it's because they're adopting capitalism, and China is adopting capitalism. That's why they're moving up, but they're still working on these very long factory lines for very little money. And sometimes they'll sell something on Amazon for nothing, and then you pay $3.99 shipping, and they undercut all the American businesses. And the stuff that you get isn't the best quality, and it could be poisonous if you touch it. But this is what they're doing. They're undercutting American businesses. And so they make the money, and then we go out of business, and then the business moves to China. Why do they move to China? It's because there's no regulations on carbon emissions, and so they don't have to pay all those. But then again, you have a bunch of slaves working for you, which is pretty much like if you were working for the emperor in China. See, China used to have an emperor, and you couldn't go beyond the Forbidden City, because if you got into the Forbidden City, you were killed. If you owned any kind of dog that the emperor owned, you were killed. Only the nobility could own certain dogs, like Shih Tzus and pugs and whatnots. Certain dogs, you were actually killed if you owned a certain dog. If you were the concubine of the emperor, and once the emperor dies, all the concubines are killed and put into the tomb with him. And people were there was no, human life was worth absolutely nothing. And the way they built these tombs was they had just thousands and thousands of slaves pounding the dirt. You see, they built a tomb, and it would take them, once the emperor became emperor, when he was a child or whatever, they would build these tombs, and they would literally all day long pound the dirt. They would have this huge log that would pound the dirt. And they would build a pyramid over the tomb. And the tomb had a lot of booby traps and mercury rivers. And if you walk in, the arrows will shoot you. It's actually pretty darn clever, but we'll never see that artwork. But these poor people work themselves to death, and then they work so hard that when they just drop dead, and they would see on the side of the pyramid that was built basically by pounding dirt, there was a funnel, and then they would kick them into that, and they would bury them in this mass grave. So your worth was actually nothing. And just an interesting thing to note, in Europe, human life was worth absolutely nothing. And do you know when the value of human life came into the world for the first time? This is the first time. You're just going to love this, and you're going to say, why is she talking like this wearing a kimono, 100-year-old kimono? Well, actually, you know when that happened? Is when Christianity, even though they say Christ didn't exist, all these people say that, when Christianity came into Europe for the first time from the Middle East, the dark-skinned Jesus versus the white Muhammad with red hair, and then the gold-skinned Buddha with blue eyes, the dark-skinned Jesus taught the value of human life, and that came into Europe. And for the first time, the world knew the value of human life, because we'd never known it before. It's amazing how Christianity, that evil religion, actually taught us the value of human life. And it certainly wasn't in China. Well, okay, that's China. Today I'll be teaching about China. Okay, China threw off the emperor. Certainly did, the last emperor. And basically the Communist Party beat him senseless into submission. And he was the last of the lines of many emperors, and he was a very young man. And he had no idea what the outside world was like. It's not like you're born into this is your job. In a way, you could say he was a victim of it, because it's like, he did what he was told. This is who he is. This is who he is. And so his teacher basically made him a drone. You're just a drone, a cell in the state. That's what communism is. You lose your humanity. You lose your love for mankind. That's what communism is. You become nothing. You just are a worker for the state. And you see, the funny thing is that these ANTIFA, these socialist people, these people who want communism, think somehow this is going to help the poor people. This is going to help humanity, when in fact, it takes humanity away. It takes your humanness away. And you're going to understand why I have this kimono on. This is amazing, because there's a great playwright, my favorite playwright, who is the playwright of humanity. And this is connected to him. Oh, I just don't do things. I don't just do things for nothing. Well, anyway, so this takes our love and our value for human life. Some others screaming and yelling about a human life, or the deportation of Mexicans and how they should be in this country. And if you see my video on what the truth is, that every single Mexican who lived in America after the war, they became Americans. All their land was kept. Nobody was deported to Mexico. It's absolutely ridiculous. And all the Mexicans, most of them are nearly 100% Spanish, descendants of Spanish conquistadors. You know how you hear stories about the evil white people coming over here and bringing all these diseases and killing off and blah, blah, blah. Well, you're fighting for the descendants of the Spanish conquistadors, the white people, which the Mexicans were considered. America gave them the designation of white, and also gave them, there is no quota, as in every country in the world has a quota about how many people from that country can actually come in per year. Mexico doesn't have a quota. So you can so this whole thing that we're mistreating them is a bunch of baloney. It's because of the drug cartels that live near the border, and that only 97% of crime is not prosecuted in Mexico, only 3%. So that means murder, rape, all that stuff isn't prosecuted. And the gangs that come over here and sell the drugs and kill the people and kill other Mexicans and African Americans, for the Black Lives Matter people, and African Americans as well as Latino people. That's what, it's initiation. See, these gangs, to get into the gang, the initiation is you have to kill some people to get in, especially white people, but people, you have to kill them to get in. So that's why we kind of want to know who's coming in. Isn't that we don't want them coming in. We just want to know who's coming in, and if they're a part of the drug cartel, and if they're going to be killing some other Latinos and African Americans and some other immigrants from countries that are not white. We don't want any of those people dead. Okay, so get that through your flipping heads. All right, get that through your flipping heads right now. Okay, all right, let's go on to China. Okay, back to China. Okay, so the teacher of the last emperor of China, he had compassion. He realized how much the emperor was suffering, and so he went light on him a little bit. And so, see, what the communists did was they had to make him a non-person. See, that's what communism does. It makes you a non-person. You're not equal. And that's what the Bill of Rights is. See, the Constitution says that we're equal. And that's why people woke up and realized, slavery is really, really wrong, because the Constitution says that all men are equal. And that's what woke us up. We're equal. Well, under communism, there's no equality. You're not even a human being. Okay, so they took that teacher who showed a little compassion for him, and they marched him into the streets with a bunch of other communist teachers, people who are supposed to be instilling communism and beating people up. They marched them, droves of them, in the street with dunce hats on, and made fools of them, because they had to remember they weren't even human. In communism, you're just a cell in a state. So that's what you want. You want everyone to be nothing. You want uniqueness. You claim that you wake up one day, we have a whole bunch of people who just saying, well, I'm this new gender, and you make up a new gender, which is all fine and good. But the problem is that you want uniqueness for yourself because you want to stand out. You want to be as unique as possible, but you want to take away humanity away from everyone else. Why can't we be unique? Why can't we be who we are too? Why can't everyone be who they are? You want uniqueness for yourself because you're taking it away from everyone else. And in fact, most of these people who join these socialist groups, actually probably all of them, what is it that you think psychologically that they desire? Well, I think I know exactly what they desire. You see, they all wanted to be bullies in school, and some of them couldn't be bullies. And a lot of them could, you know what, I can't make it in this world either. I'm as poor as dirt and will be on the street extremely soon. That's how bad my living situation is. So don't give me this, you're nothing, or you're not rich. Neither am I. I don't have a penny, and the rest of my family are all professors and doctors, okay? So I know what it's like to be poor, all right? So don't give me any bullshit. Any bullshit. Everybody, you want everyone to suffer and to be as poor as you are, or as poor because you know The only thing that you can recreate new is your gender. You want to be unique. You want to be something. You want to be heard. You want to be seen, which is good, which is a good thing. Be unique. Become something, but you know you can't. And the only way that you can control other people is to have the state make everyone poor and everyone suffer. And there is your triumph. There is your triumph. You'll be standing on top of what pile? Everyone is as poor and as wretched and as suffering as you. Now, do you know what happens in these countries? ANTIFA people, do you know what happens in these countries? Do you know what Mao did and his Red Army and the young people that he sent out, his Red Guard that he sent out? Well, you see, what he did was he had everybody, he said everybody has to make metal. Everyone has to produce metal. So what they did was they melted down their pots and pans and forks, everything they owned to produce some metal, because China was going to be the top producer of metal. And what happened? Millions, I think it was 25 million people starved to death because of that, because they had no pots and pans. Because you see, the dictator, see what the dictator does, it's the most narcissistic thing that someone can do, is that they wake up one day and on a whim, they have a really bad idea that makes everyone has to follow it. Otherwise they die, because he had execution quotas. It doesn't matter whether you did something right or wrong, or even people who were loyal to the party and loyal to Mao. He had execution quotas. Certain number of people had to die every single day. So he didn't care if all of these people died. And he kept making up new things that made the people suffer. And then he had this thing called the 100 Flowers. And all the wealthy people, he wanted, basically what he wanted to know was who was loyal to him and who was not loyal to him. And the way he found out was he asked each person how they would run the country. And by their answer, he could figure out if they were actually loyal to him or not. They were very eager to help him and thought that maybe they might get on his good side and maybe they wouldn't die. It was all about not dying. And so he knew who to kill. So pretty much those 100 flowers or 500,000 flowers, those more than 100 flowers, were all executed. You see, and then he told his Red Guard, which were all the young people, they went out and they terrorized middle class. We're not talking about rich people, but just poor people, middle class people, and the elderly poor. He terrorized them. Why did he do this? Well, he didn't want any middle class people. He wanted as many poor people as possible. So they were dependent on the state, which is kind of interesting why you bring people into this country and you say, well, you vote Democrat. Of course you have to vote Democrat, otherwise you won't get any free benefits. You want as many people dependent on the state as possible. So you want to kill off the middle class people, right? So he sent these people off to terrorize and beat them. And so many of them committed suicide. And then he terrorized the elderly people. Why did he terrorize the elderly people? Because the dictator, this is the ultimate act of narcissism. The dictator didn't want anyone wiser than he was. He didn't want anyone out there who knew history. He didn't want anyone out there who remembered any emperor, any artist, any poet, anything at all that made China the beautiful country that it was, the talent of these people. You see, that's the thing about communism. It completely kills. If you go against the party, or the party does, even if you're loyal to the party makes an example of you, like Room 101 in 1984. Even the most loyal people to the party are killed. And everything that they've ever said or done is completely relinquished. It vanishes. You vanish. So the elderly people remembered all these unique people, all those artists, all those people like you say, well, my particular gender is this, or that, and I call it this, or that, and I dress like this, and I'm unique. Anybody that remembers you and your uniqueness, don't you see, this goes completely against what you want. You want everyone to be nothing. You see, in communism, no one is anything but a cell in the state. Unless you work for the state, you're killed off, you're cancer. If you're poor, you're cancerous. If you're sick, you're cancerous. They kill you. No one is taken care of. There's no such thing as universal health care. If you're sick or old, you are killed, or disabled in any way or not smart enough, you are killed off. You are the cancer. That's what happens in communism. There's no such thing as universal health care to help all the poor and needy. No way. You want them killed off. You want the elderly killed off because they're elderly, because soon they won't be able to do Tai Chi anymore, and they won't be able to keep themselves up. And you don't want the state doesn't want to pay the money to keep anyone alive, but the memory of all these artists that were unique, all these gay and bi and homosexual people who created all this artwork and the plays and the poetry and the songs and the instruments, everything they did would be forgotten by killing off all the elderly. And then they dug up the graves. They dug up all the graves and the artwork that was in the graves and the songs and the poetry that was buried, like we find in Egypt, all this stuff that we find in Sumer, which ISIS blew up. All these things are the memory, the history of mankind, the history of our past, our knowledge, what has brought us forward and made life a little comfortable and less like we're living in caves. Like, do you want to go back to living in caves? This that has progressed humanity forward, that smartphone that's in your hand would not exist under could not exist under communism. All this, they dug all this beautiful artwork up. And can you imagine most of this artwork? A lot of this artwork was done by gay or bi or trans people. Can you imagine everything they created and thought of? Because it's a tremendous amount of talent in those communities. My favorite playwright is Tennessee Williams. Favorite. It was completely smashed. It was demolished. Like these artists never existed. Like the past are. I grew up when I was a child. I felt I loved China. That's all. I couldn't get enough of it. I was a baby and I picked up chopsticks and knew how to use them. I was fascinated with China. I had no idea that China had turned communist. But all that was demolished because there is everybody wears gray or that horrible green color. And the only color is the red flag with the star in it, just like George Soros's horse that happened to win the Triple Crown this year. He ran and won it. He won it in red with a yellow star across. That's the only color in China. There is no beauty. There's pictures of the dictator, the pictures of Mao everywhere. It is Mao. You're a Maoist. It's only Mao. It will forever be Mao. That's all, just like the dear leader, in North Korea. That's the only thing that's on television. That's the only thing when you go to school you can learn about is the dear leader. That's what communist does. It is the ultimate act of narcissism because the leader is not working for the people. It's not about the people, anything. It's about the leader everything, and the leader has everything, and everyone who's loyal to the leader has lots of stuff until he decides to kill them on a whim, because that's what they do. Even those who are the most loyal, he teaches a lesson to the others, and he kills those too. The leader is everything. It's an act of narcissism. It's not an act of the people or for the people. And then his beloved Red Guard, the young people that he sent off to do all this dirty work and to drive people to suicide and to kill the elderly people. You know what he did? Well, in China, there used to be beautiful farmlands and rice paddies. It was a beautiful place. And people used to own their own farms. But when it changed over to communism, everything was like MASH. Ever see the show MASH? Everything was industrialized. And you worked and you worked and you worked for 20 hours. You know how you complain about the whole thing that you get paid enough and you work too much? Well, that's what happens in communism. All you do is work like a dog, and there is no break. If there breaks, there is no break or leisure time. See, there's nothing. And then when you go to eat, the food is crap. And you're funneled in there and funneled out. And you sleep in these little tiny hovels on the floor. And the farmlands became so oppressive. They were once farmlands, and they were oppressive. They were the harshest place to live. And what he did was, you see, once a bunch of his beloved Red Guard, those young people, his ANTIFA, he gave a kiss to and watched them get killed by firing squad, because they had to kill them off, because they're crazed, because you gotta get rid of the people who are out of control, the people who are violent and out of control. You've got them running around doing all this violence and torturing people because they're crazed. You're acting absolutely crazed. And so what happens is you get to a point you've got to bring discipline back, and you kill them off. And then the rest of them, millions, he sent off to these harsh workhouses in the country, which most of them perished. And in 4 years, we've just realized that the total went up. We didn't realize this many were killed in 4 years under Mao. 45 million were killed under Mao in 4 years. 4 years. And we're talking about people who were loyal to him. And then in 1976, it was a total of 78 million people. You see, that's what communism does. Just like Bill Ayers said that this country, whether underground, remember he blew up buildings, and some people did get killed. The people who were working for him, actually, who were making the bombs, got killed, which was really interesting. And Obama started his campaign in his living room. And if you say anything about Bill, oh, he's a professor. He's a dignified, respected professor. Don't say anything about him. He's a Weather Underground who blew up a bunch of buildings and actually killed his own people, which is really interesting. He killed his own people. He said that this country wouldn't change unless 30 million people died. Now, who are those 30 million people? You see, you will kill the people, right? And they will commit suicide. But then the dictator always kills you, like the Pol Pot, the Khmer Rouge, and then Stalin, who killed all the disabled and the sick people. He sent them off to an island, gave them a sack of flour, and then they had to mix the flour with the water on that island, but the water on that island happened to be polluted, and they got dysentery, and then they ended up cannibalizing each other. That's how we got rid of the disabled and the sick and the stupid, the people who are challenged, like me, and let's see who else, and the elderly people. He got rid of them. because there's just, they don't have the money to take care of anyone who is not going to work for the state and not give 100% to the state. Once you get old and feeble, once you get sickly, you're dead. There is no health care. Like Obama put in health care and said to us, you know, the dear leader says that it was going to be $2,500 cheaper and you can keep your doctor. And as it turned, but that's a good thing for him to lie, because he brought in universal health care. But that's interesting because there's 30 million people who still aren't covered. So he didn't cover everyone. What he actually did was take $685 billion out of Medicare, which takes care of the elderly. But you don't want the elderly, just like Emmanuel, whatchamacallit, the one who, Ezekiel Emanuel, his brother, said that he wants to die at 75 because you don't want the elderly because they're a drain on the system, right? So why not take it out of Medicare? But basically what he did was he just built office buildings and bought computers and stuff like that. So, and then, of course, then we die. And then what he did was he opened up the borders to people whose families chose to stay in Mexico, not America. Every Mexican who wanted to stay in America after that war, and we paid Mexico for the land. After the war, we actually paid Mexico for the land, and every Mexican who wanted to stay here stayed here. So that's a bunch of baloney. You really need to learn their history. And then they took all that land away from the Native Americans. The Spanish conquistadors did with all the land they took in America. And then the Mexicans did in fact, and kept trying to take even more land away from them, from the Native Americans. So how are they better? How are they better? As it turned out, it was a bunch of, people, 200,000 people died, they say, because the conquistadors, who are the Spanish people, killed off most of most of the Aztecs. It turned out that a bunch of tuna brought that disease. It had nothing to do with the conquistadors at all, killing anybody off whatsoever. It's a total lie. So that's really interesting. So who are you blaming? Why do you hate so much? I want to know why you hate so much. Why do you want everyone to live in abject poverty? Why do you want everyone to live in row houses? Why is it that capitalism is the only thing on this earth that has brought people out of poverty? And in fact, people who were impoverished, who could not reach the upper classes, were able to reach the upper classes because of capitalism. They could take themselves out of poverty. And was, in fact, as much as you hate the English in India, the caste system, there's the top class, which is the Brahmin class, which is actually my brother-in-law. I'm related to Brahmins. So the Brahmin caste, in India, in the land of people who are not white. And it's interesting. See, Brahmins are dark-skinned and light-skinned. My brother-in-law said to me, and he's really funny, actually, very good cook too. He said that, his father is as dark as he is, but his mother is as white as his wife. So Brahmins are both colors. India, when people moved into India, and we know that Sanskrit actually came from the Northeast. That's the language of the Vedas. They did not come in and kill a bunch of Indians. They just came in and were absorbed into the Indian society. So all you have to do is come in and get absorbed and accept the religion and the ways of life and stuff like that. And they found that Mohenjo-Daro, that thing with the thing that the Aryans came in and killed a bunch of people. They tested all the skeletons, and they were all buried like hundreds and thousands of years apart. So it wasn't a massacre. It was just, this was a graveyard that you just dug up. So this is baloney. So, well, anyway, when the English took over India, you had the caste system, and if you're on the bottom, the untouchable, there's the untouchables. You could never move up. You could never get better. Capitalism is the only thing that did. But in the caste system, you can never move up. And that's a non-white country. Very interesting. Non-white country, okay? Dark, and my brother-in-law is extremely dark-skinned, okay? Extremely dark. If you love dark-skinned people, made my brother-in-law and my nephew dark-skinned, okay? So when the English took over, even though monarchy isn't that great, they actually created education and employment. And people in India, through education, even though they were on the bottom of the caste system, which in their world can never move up to the top, they were educated, made money, and because of that, moved up to the top and were accepted in the higher castes. So as bad as you think the English and the white people are, they actually aren't. And this is going to be the end of this little talk because it's getting very late. Well, anyway, I hope you learned something. Thank you for sticking with me to the end because it all makes sense. And unfortunately, we've got the ANTIFA people who want to create violence and the people who feel that they're not violent at all, yet they vote socialist somehow. They think that it is some kind of peaceful system. But you see, socialism is communism. So the United Soviet Socialist Republic, Soviet Socialist. The Nazis were the National Socialist Workers' Party. It's socialism. It doesn't work. It has never worked. Give me an example when it has worked. It's communism, even though it comes in sheep's clothing like Bernie Sanders, okay, or I don't know who else. I don't know. There's that begins with a C, that woman. But anyway, I think I'd love to debate her. I just would love to debate her. Just be on heads. I'd just be right on top of everything. Or you've got ANTIFA, who's got the violence. Socialism always brings war. It's always revolution. It's always violent. Even Trotsky used to hang priests off the back of trains. He was not peaceful at all whatsoever. That's a fallacy. Okay. Alrighty. So anyway, thank you for stopping by. And I will explain to you why I'm wearing this. And that it's about socialism taking away humanity, our love, our feelings, and the greatest playwright of them all after Shakespeare, the American Shakespeare. That's what this kimono is for. Anyway, one little kiss from Felina. Goodbye for now.